classic.
The Prince, the Discourses, and the overall ethic of Machiavelli,
Okay.
which, as everyone will agree, will make him distinct.
Okay.
A watershed moment in political theory. If somebody were to tell me, teach me everything you know about politics, I am beginning with Machiavelli, no question. Not with Plato, not with Aristotle, with Machiavelli.
Why would you say that?
Because Machiavelli is not concerned with presenting an abstract, utopian, idealistic vision of how politics should be. Never mind how politics should be.
How it is.
He is concerned with politics as it is.
We could even say he's the father of realism, right?
He is the originator of well, we could say Thucydides, but Machiavelli has more hindsight than Thucydides,
We
right?
could say John Mearsheimer, but Machiavelli has better style and more hair.
Yes.
Wow.
Machiavelli is Mearsheimer with Italian fashion sense and more hair.
Why not? Why not? Now, what I know about Machiavelli is that he was a civil servant his whole life. He was more a theorist than a practitioner.
More than a theorist, he comes from a time when elite houses would hire such philosophers, Renaissance men, for example, to serve in their court. You
Kind
can
of
think-
like Petrarch.
Yes.
Yes.
Are they? Yes. The Medici family were the patrons of Machiavelli, for example. Other famous people that were patronized by the Medicis include Galileo Galilei. So as Galileo Galilei attempts to express the essential facts of the cosmos, Machiavelli attempts to express the essential facts of political conduct.
Why would those rich and powerful people have people like Machiavelli, who are just political and philosophical theorists, finance them to tutor their offsprings?
It's the same thing to this day. Have you noticed that the people who run those Fortune 500 companies, those billionaires, those millionaires, those 1%ers, they're not sending their kids to study computer science or engineering. Their kids are being sent to study liberal arts degrees. Machiavelli was a preceptor, ultimately. He was a man studied in philosophy, history, arithmetic, geometry. He was giving the moral will to the Medici family.
I see.
Yes.
I see. So Machiavelli basically is giving guidance to rule. He's a professor, we could say even a public speaker, like nowadays in that capitalistic world, like those people who make YouTube videos and talk
Yes.
about... It's kind of the self-help.
Lots of people read self-help books, but the people who write the self-help books read Machiavelli. And,
48 Laws of Power.
yeah, you know,
There's a lot of Machiavelli in it, right? Like
that book has been described as Machiavellian, yes.
we could say that, yeah, by the way, that adjective Machiavellian, right? Like it has such a bad connotation, right, in today's society. Why?
I'll tell you what. Machiavelli, at first, he was accused of being a peddler of evil, an
Yes.
advocate of Satan. And for that reason, we're going to find that Christian virtue and virtues that you practice in your private life aren't always suitable to be practiced in the public life. There's a conflict between Christian virtue and
virtu.
Political virtue.
In the sense of Machiavelli.
Yes.
So what is the sense of virtu in terms of Machiavellian political philosophy?
That's a big question.
You know what I would say?
Yeah.
Cesare Borgia.
In fact, there's a theory that the Prince is either a satire of Cesare Borgia or singing the praises of Cesare Borgia, and he plays a big role in there. I think The Prince is a book about a man who seeks to create political order from chaos. Machiavelli was writing in Renaissance Italy, and he was saying, how did this happen? We used to be the Roman Empire, and now we're a bunch of fragmented principalities.
Like Petrarch.
Yeah, like it's chaos. He's writing not for the average public, and that's why he gets accused of being a peddler of evil. He's not writing for the public. He's writing for a distinct man.
For
Lorenzo.
the shepherds.
Yes, he's writing for shepherds. He's writing for those talented leaders who will create the political order from the chaos.
So the Prince was basically a letter.
That's how it started.
A letter to Lorenzo the Magnificent, Lorenzo the Medici's son.
Yes.
Okay.
The Republic of Florence had undergone extensive political tumult. There was a Republican period, an aristocratic period. The Friar Savonarola overthrew the Medicis. The Medicis came back with an army. Ultimately, because Machiavelli is a Republican, he organized an army to defend the Republic. And when the Medicis came back, Machiavelli was exiled from his beloved Florence. And this depressed him deeply. And so in order to win back his old position, win back the favor of the Medici family, he wrote this text, The Prince, to Lorenzo de' Medici, as a handbook, a guide, the ultimate and essential playbook for the maintenance and acquisition of power. That is The Prince.
You know, nowadays lots of politicians have The Prince as a book that is used to read before sleeping, right?
It's the bedside book.
Un livre de chevet.
Yes.
A bedside book, exactly.
The same way that Drake keeps 48 laws of power on his bedside.
I see.
Politicians keep Machiavelli on their bedside.
So let's get a bit of context.
Sure.
So when was The Prince written, and in what type of political context? What was happening in Italy? We know that Italy was the spiritual heir, we could say, of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And that empire, as you said, got dismantled by the invasion of the barbarians. We've got lots of principalities, the
Yes.
Kingdom of Naples, city-states in
Yes.
the Greek sense of the word, right?
Yes. Apollos.
Policies,
Yes.
exactly. So Machiavelli is writing a letter to a man who will one day be able to do what would later be called the Rinascimento, the Renaissance, the
Yes.
unification of Italy.
Yes.
That is his project.
He's seeking a political rebirth.
I see.
For him, Machiavelli's method is concerned with the cycle of history.
Tell
He
me.
says, if you're not rising, you're falling. And he noticed, well, we used to be the Roman Empire. He's looking at Italy. We used to be Rome. And now we're just a dismantled conglomeration of city-states constantly at war with each other. Clearly, Rome was the high point, and this is the decline. We are in the period of decline. He is looking for the man that will restore order to Italy. He is looking for the man that will create political order out of chaos.
And that man would be Cesare Borgia.
That's who Machiavelli believed it would be.
I see. Why? Why do you think? Cesare Borgia, let's get a bit of context.
Let's go into this man.
He was the son of a pope,
Pope Julius, was it?
Pope Julius.
Yes.
Quite ironically,
Yes.
right? And Cesare Borgia, Nietzsche used to say that, look at life. Cesare Borgia is cardinal. Like he was a cardinal.
Mm-hmm.
He used his father's political affiliation and weight to be able to conquer other cities.
Yes.
And Machiavelli used to present the prince as a personification of Cesare Borgia.
Yes.
Why would you say? Like the sense of virtù. Let's
dig into that word.
Let's
yes.
understand the word virtù in the Machiavellian sense of it,
Yeah.
right? What is virtue nowadays, according to most people?
I want to begin with the Platonic definition from
Please
Plato.
do.
Virtue is the quality that makes something good.
Yes.
So the virtue of a knife is its sharpness.
Wow.
Right? The virtue of a knife is its sharpness. So when we are talking about the virtue of a political leader,
Yes.
that has to do with their judgment, with their
Yes.
decision making, with their leadership, things like courage, honor, right? Those are virtuous qualities for a politician. to have.
Nowadays.
All days.
Okay.
All days.
No.
If we follow Machiavelli's method, which says that history is cyclical and repeats itself, if we follow that method, then virtue is eternal.
I see. That is why he used to say that we need to dig in the past in order to understand the future.
Yes.
To even guess the future. Because human nature is born out of passions that are repetitive,
Yes.
right?
It's passion which sets the man into motion.
I see.
And passions are constant.
You know, as two great political science students, you and I, we've both read and understand, hopefully, The Prince.
Yes.
And we could say that it is a manual.
It's a handbook.
It's a handbook.
It's a specific genre of book. This genre of book is called the Mirror for Princes,
Yes.
where we were talking about elite families used to hire philosophers, educators, literaires, erudites, scholars to produce works for them. For example, Louis XIV hired Jean-Baptiste Lully to compose music. Who is it? The King of Persia, Frederick? Frederick I hired Bach to compose some music. The Medicis hired Machiavelli as their diplomat. In the past, it used to be the case that this genre of prince manual, Cicero, for example, he was a Roman. He wrote-
Orator.
Yes,
Statesman.
yes. Cicero, the Ciceronian political doctrine is that by doing good, you can do well. Machiavelli is not in such accordance with that. Because we're looking at virtue, there's a distinction between the Christian virtue and the political virtue. And where do we draw the distinction between Christian virtue and political virtue?
You know, I would say Christian virtue is based on equity. It's based on the just, what is just. You see, what is right. In Christian virtue, you could say that what is right and what is just makes one. In political virtue, in virtù, in
Yes.
the sense, the Machiavellian sense, you could say that what is just is what is practical. What is practical not for the individual,
But for the state.
but for the state.
Uh-huh.
And the state must be personified into an individual interest, which is the interest of the prince.
Yes.
So by doing his personal interest, by achieving it through any means necessary to achieve the greater good,
Yes.
the prince is virtuous. For example, Machiavelli gives lots of example.
Because he's a historian ultimately.
He's a historian. He's kind
Yes.
of the Robert Greene of his time.
Yeah.
We could say now, let's not get into
Comparisons.
giving our personal opinions on each writer, right? Especially the ones who are still alive.
Yeah.
But we could say that Machiavelli is a man who decided to give a sense of purpose to education
Yes.
of the elite classes.
Yes.
And why would princes and rich and powerful people employ persons who are well versed in the classics? What do I mean by the classics, first of all? Could you please give us an insight?
I want to answer your question immediately. And to answer your question, why do rich people employ philosophers in their court?
Well versed in the classics. What's the
Yes.
importance of the classics?
We
And
have to ask,
what do I mean by the classics?
you mean those books that, rather than books, rather than ink printed on pages, they are like songs which have echoed through eternity.
I see.
The Iliad, for example. It's not just a story about Achilles and Agamemnon
Yes.
and their honor clashing with each other. It's the encyclopedia of the Western world, and it expresses. We'll discuss the Iliad in greater terms anyway.
Yes.
But by classics we mean pillars, bedrock, the foundation, the soil, the fertile soil from which the great trees arise.
I would even say that the Iliad and the Odyssey is more a spiritual book than anything else.
Yes.
Now, we could discuss much about the historicity, the validity of the Iliad and the Odyssey. But I would say that it's more of a spiritual book. You see, like every man is confronted in his life by the fact that he might be tempted by lots of mermaids, sirens,
You're
right?
talking about the Odyssey now.
I'm talking about the Odyssey, right? Most men are confronted with that big dilemma. You have lots of sirens and mermaids all around you who might take you astray from your course. And what shall be your course?
To return to rule on Ithaca and be a devoted husband to Penelope.
Completely.
There you go.
Completely. Monogamy.
Yeah.
Stability. Voila.
We've just expressed that the classics have spiritual significance.
Exactly.
That, like I said, they are not just ink printed onto pages, but they are songs that have echoed into eternity. You may find it ironic, but the Iliad is a very relatable book. There have never been such relatable characters as those demigods and kings. I'll say the same thing about Hamlet. Julius Caesar, the Roman Emperor, Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. There have never been such relatable characters as those, because those are classics. They are enduring, they are universal. It does not matter that I am a son of immigrants. I can still relate to the Roman Emperor.
Completely.
Literature does that. The humanities does that. And when we discuss the relevance of a high court in some old principality, imagine the most decadent scene ever, right? With arms, armor, wealth, luxury, and riches at their disposal, why would they bother with a man who simply knows about the letters on the page? We've discussed the value of the classics, but I also want to address this question, whether or not politics is an art or a science. Whether or not for me, the fact that these families hire orators and philosophers, erudites and scholars, expresses the fact that no, it is not a hard science. Politics is not a hard science in the same way that physics is. Politics, rather, if we're discussing in Machiavelli's method, is a pragmatic art form. Rather than a hard science, politics is a pragmatic art form. And the way that you develop this artistic craft is through a study of the humanities, through a study of the classics.
The humanities, the
Through
study of
history.
humankind.
Yes, the humanities.
Human nature.
Humanitas. It means to become more human. You fulfill the dignity of your humanity by studying those things which bring you closer to your own
And
soul.
why would the classics be the basis of humanities? Maybe because the Greeks considered themselves as being the most superior beings on the planet because they used reason?
Reason and language.
Okay,
And by not
so-
having reason and language, you are a barbarian.
So what is a barbarian? What is a barbarian in the sense of the word? We know the etymology of it, barbaros, the one who talks in a bar, right? In a non-understandable
Way.
way, right? But we could even say that a barbarian is somebody who lets his passions loose.
Yes.
Who has no sense of equilibrium.
Look, the one thing which has distinguished man from the rest of the creatures on earth is the fact that he can resist the call of nature.
Yes.
That when nature yells at him and screams at him, and when nature lights his loins on fire, for example, he can deny it.
Yes.
Man can deny it. Man is able to deny it.
Man
And
has countenance.
He has reason.
Completely.
Man has reason. He is able to think above the level of his temptations and internal desires.
And especially man is able to cooperate with other men through
Social intelligence.
the establishment of an inner kingdom, right?
Establishment of institutions. This is what Machiavelli was concerned about.
Completely.
The establishment.
You know, Jesus used to say, the kingdom of heaven is within you, right?
Yes.
And it's by, that book, Harari, Sapiens.
Yuval Noah Harari.
Yuval Noah Harari, he used to say that men, despite the fact that they were different in a cultural, in a physical, in a mental way, were able to cooperate between each other by establishing those inner kingdoms, those myths, those
Yes.
legends that unite them
Storytelling.
in times of trouble.
Storytelling.
Completely.
The Neanderthal had a bigger brain than the Homo sapien.
But what was the issue with the Neanderthal?
The Neanderthal, though it had a bigger brain, the Homo sapien had a higher social intelligence.
Yes.
The Homo sapien was able to build political and social communities, was able to gather around the fireplace and exchange resources, knowledge,
see.
and wisdom.
I see.
And most importantly, storytelling. That is the beauty of sitting down with your family at the dinner table and discussing, son, how was your day? Father, how was your day at work, for example? What did you learn at school? You are simply repeating a cycle which has been innate to the human race since prehistory.
I understand.
Since prehistory, gathering around the fire. Look, we may even say, rather than Homo sapiens, we are Homo narrans, narrators. We are distinct from the others in that other animals because of reason, but because we also practice progress. The bears were eating fish and salmon 1,000,000 years ago, and to this day they are eating fish and salmon. 1,000,000 years ago we were also eating fish and salmon, but we have managed to industrialize the process.
Today we have sushi.
Yes, we have progress.
Incredible.
Because we have been able to impart wisdom to our peers through the classics and through history. That's what Machiavelli would have liked. That's
see.
why he insists on history as a method.
Perfect. So knowing that, what is it about the Prince? What does it talk about? What is the essence that we can understand and conclude after reading the Prince? Like if you were to explain that for a person, an individual who wouldn't have the patience, the time to read the Prince, how would you summarize it quickly, swiftly, smoothly?
Oh, jeez, bro. Well, let me just say that.
Say it.
Your question was, how would I summarize the Prince?
Exactly.
I would say the Prince itself is a summary, because Machiavelli wrote the Discourses. The Discourses are more expansive, but he's trying to win the favor of Lorenzo di Medici now. It doesn't make sense to say, yo, Lorenzo, here's a whole volume of my work, read it and see what you like.
So-
man, he has a principality to govern. He's not going to read Machiavelli's Discourses. So the Prince is a summary of the Discourses, essentially. It's the raw essence. When you boil down the Discourses,
Yes.
you get the Prince.
It's a small book, huh?
Yes.
And it's made out of small points, right? That Machiavelli develops.
Chapters, morals.
It's not even chapters, it's points, it's big titles
and-
that he develops.
In fact, some of these chapters are only like half a page long. For
Yes,
example.
yes,
It's practical wisdom.
completely. So basically when Machiavelli tells the ruler, like, you should invade a city not by using, for example, mercenaries, because the mercenaries would basically, at the end of the siege,
Desert you.
desert you and even turn against you.
Yes.
You should invade a city with people who have the same mental state, the same religion, the same way of looking and apprehending life as you. People who are loyal to you, not by means of materialism, but spiritualism,
Yes.
spirituality. You see? For example, those are small points that we could even use in business nowadays.
Oh, I'll bet a lot of business guys over there on Bay Street, on Wall Street, they love Machiavelli. And you've
Of
seen
course.
I've seen books at like bookstores, for example, Machiavelli for businessmen. That's profound, actually.
Yes.
I think that's really profound, the fact that those type of books exist.
So you mean in that individualistic North American capitalistic world, each and every single one of us is a prince in his own way.
I really like that.
We could even say that the leader of a family, right,
Is a prince in his own
is
household.
a prince in his own household, right?
Yes.
A CEO is a prince himself.
Of his corporation.
Or even an employee.
Is a prince of his team.
He might say that for the CEO, he's just a pawn on his chess game.
Yes.
But he might even say that on his own chess game, he's the king and the CEO is a pawn. Everybody can place himself as being the king of his own chess game. And to understand how to expand, achieve, and be able to build consistently that kingdom, he should get educated.
Through the humanities.
In a princely way.
Through histories. Yes. And that's the value of a liberal arts education. That's why we are in political science, for example. Because it is the field of study.
Yes.
This is why you get a political science degree.
Why did you choose a political science degree?
I'll tell you why you should get a political science degree. Political knowledge is going to become very rare in the future. It is the field of study which most closely resembles that of a classical liberal arts education, which in the past used to only be available to kings, monarchs, and princes.
I would even say that with the development of technicality, with AI, artificial intelligence, the industry, the machine, it is rare nowadays of having people who think, who actually take a thought, meditate it, and think if that could be wrong, right, virtuous, assertive, or indispensable. Like it is more and more valuable to have people who understand. You know, how many CEOs have I met who studied philosophy? I thought that most of them would have studied economy or business or finance.
Commerce, something like that.
But most of them turn towards what is spiritual, what is interior kingdom, to be able to then manifest it in their material life.
Yes.
So I would say that the studies of political science is a broad one, first of all. Me personally, I've taken political science because it's a degree that would englobe law, philosophy, history,
sociology,
art,
culture.
economics. So it's a pretty broad degree.
To be a good politician, you need to be good at many fields. You have to be the Renaissance man, as Machiavelli was, as his peers were.
So you mean that you need to be able to wield the pen as good as the...
Yes, as the sword.
You
must wield the pen as well as you do the sword. As
a scholar,
as well as you do the
scholar and a warrior?
Exactly.
The greatest statesmen were scholars and warriors. Winston Churchill.
John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy has a crazy war story, for example.
Really?
Do you know John F. Kennedy's war story?
Tell me about it.
He was on a patrol boat, and then his ship was... He hated his officers, by the way. John F. Kennedy hated his senior officers.
Yes.
Imagine an American drill sergeant screaming in your ear, go get them, kill them, advance, you know? Kennedy hated this guy. He ordered his patrol boat out into the ocean, in the Pacific, to do a patrol. And then Kennedy's patrol ship got collided into by a Japanese destroyer.
I see.
Now Kennedy, and of course they had to bail the ship, the patrol boat. They jumped overboard. Kennedy had very bad back pain. Yes. And I'm not talking about the back pain that a high school student has, where they complain that their textbooks are too heavy and that they have to crouch over their desk. I mean...
Sclerosis.
Yeah. John F. Kennedy could not climb the stairs. That's how bad his back pain was.
Yes.
And when he was overboard in the ocean, he could barely swim anyway, but what he did was he grabbed his fellow soldier on his back and swam with him on his back. They arrived on an island. They drank coconut milk. They communicated with the natives through the sand. Kennedy or one of his peers swam back to the base to retrieve their rescue ship. And it's because of this reason that Kennedy's life nearly got jeopardized as a result of the bellicose, belligerence, jingoism of his commanding officer, that Kennedy for the rest of his life and in the execution of his presidential office, he was skeptical of the military brass screaming in his ear. When it was discovered that the USSR had placed nuclear missile silos in Cuba, immediately the military brass and the jingos were saying, bomb them, invade them, do this, do that. But all that Kennedy could hear was his old commander back in the Pacific screaming at him, go get them, and then causing his life to be in danger. And it's for that reason that temperance, that Kennedy would instead put a blockade rather than order a full-scale invasion. And that's the value of the warrior scholar. That's the value of wielding the pen as well as you do the sword.
I see.
Yeah, man.
I see. Very interesting. Very interesting.
A great war story. I love my city more than my soul. You know?
Who said that? Machiavelli?
Machiavelli said that.
Beautiful.
I love my city more than my soul. You know who said that?
So,
the peddler of evil, Machiavelli.
So you mean that those great statesmen, right, were seeing themselves as being warriors and scholars of the city.
Yeah, not just American presidents, but Oliver Cromwell, for example.
Oliver Cromwell.
He was just a merchant that, through his oration and his war-fighting skill, decapitated a king. Charles II, I believe it was.
I see.
Or was it the first? I can't recall. 1642, English Civil War.
I see. That was a big mistake. But that should be a discussion after.
Another day.
Another day.
Another day.
After reading what book? Which
the Hobbes, Leviathan.
No, Edmund Burke.
No, this English Civil War is specific to the Leviathan of Hobbes.
Yes?
Yeah. Hobbes was writing in terms of the English Civil War.
Oh, the state of nature.
Yeah.
He was discussing that period of time.
Exactly. He was justifying the divine right monarch. He was justifying the rule of Charles.
I see. So it was against Oliver Cromwell.
Yes.
I see.
Hobbes was an opponent of Cromwell.
I see. So he was saying that maybe if we continue that way, we're going to become a society that embraces the state of nature, of all against all.
One day we'll read the Leviathan. We've read the Leviathan.
Completely.
One day we'll make an episode about it.
Why not? But let's get back to Machiavelli, Nikita.
Yes.
So basically, it was a letter written to the son of
a great prince.
Let's talk about the formation, the constituency of that great republic of Florence. Right? It was a republic with the Gondontieri, the public speaker, the man in charge of the executive power. Okay. And who was kind of a referee between the different factions, the big families of the city. But it's quite interesting understanding the political structure of that society back in the days. Why? Because we can see that the Medici were the rule behind the facade.
The rule behind the facade.
Completely. They were the ones holding the strings and pulling them, but without showing themselves as being the true rulers of the city.
They did it discreetly.
Discreetly,
How
completely.
so?
How so? Well, by financing, first of all, the fortune of the Medicis was
expensive. They were a banking family, first of all.
Exactly, and it was firstly based on the election of a certain pope.
Pope Julius II.
Pope Julius, probably.
Something like that.
We should check that. We should check that. So basically, the Medici became a rich and big family, the biggest banking family in the whole world, so
Pretty
Europe,
much.
because they became the bankers of the Pope.
Yes.
So every single transaction, the
which one?
the tax that was paid by...
A tax, a fare, let's say.
Well, it's called a thigh or a thigh. We forgot, right? But you can check. So it was paid by the church, for the church, and it was passing through the Medici banks. So the Medici, by virtue of that, became the richest bankers in the world.
Yeah.
And they used to finance political activists in order to advance their financial agenda.
Yes.
You see? For example, we could discuss their opposition to the Pazzi. The Pazzi family.
Okay, it was a rival aristocratic
family. It was a rival aristocratic family. So they were basing their power on war rather than trade. And we still have that nowadays, right? The end of the samurai, the end of chivalry, when the capitalist, when the bourgeois
displaced the aristocrats.
Exactly. We could say that the warrior wasn't using his sword, so it went to rust.
Yes.
So who took over?
The bourgeois.
Who's the bourgeois? The merchant.
It's the peasant who acquires some production means and sells his products, and sells so much of them that he displaces the aristocrat.
But you know, the Medicis were called by many, they were called and being people who, peddlers, people who give money with interest, and that was completely abhorred by the Catholic Church at the time. You know that Christians didn't have the right to give money, to lend money with interest.
Yes.
But they were looking at themselves as being, on the contrary, people who would give benefit to the other, who would provide a capital to people who wouldn't even dream of amassing that capital, in order to be able to create, to establish. For example, nowadays you want to buy a house, you have the money in your bank account. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Very soon.
Right. But what would you do?
Seek out a loan.
A loan.
Yes.
So the loan, which is with interest, I would suppose.
Of course.
is a mean for you to better yourself.
Yes.
So the Medicis used to look at themselves as being people who would give opportunities to the lower classes and the lowest of stratums of the society.
I would say that's the difference between an aristocrat and a rich person. Having money does not make you aristocratic. The difference between an aristocrat and the bourgeoisie who replaced them is what?
Well, an aristocrat would be a landlord, first of all. Now, you would have two types of aristocrats. You would have people who, the aristocracy of the sword, la noblesse d'épée.
The people that provided the armies for the king.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And you would have, well, the people who fought with the king.
Yes.
And you would have l'aristocratie de notables. People who would be big scholars, who would
composers, musicians,
exactly,
artists,
the
sculptors.
education
Exactly.
to be, for example, Winston Churchill's ancestors, before the Duke of Marlborough, who defeated Louis XIV, at Marlborough, due the name the Palace of Marlborough, his ancestors before him were notables, lawyers,
yes,
lawgivers, you see? So you have two types of aristocrats, but the bourgeois is the merchant.
Yes.
Is the one who developed his status in society through
commerce.
Services.
Yes.
We could say services. Because you see the French word notable, you could say it englobes the financial services
Yes.
and the lawyers and the merchants.
These are people who through their, let's say through their commerce, they acquire status through commerce.
Completely.
That's the bourgeoisie.
Completely. You could say they're the heroes of peace.
The heroes of peace.
And you could say that the aristocracy are the heroes of war. Voilà.
Bro.
Take notes.
I got my book in front of me.
Yeah, yeah.
I got my
You
pen.
should take note of that.
Oh, shit. You said there's two types of aristocrats. The war fighter and the scholar.
Yes.
But the prince is both.
Why?
The prince is both. Machiavelli reminds us there's two types of combat. And you should be proficient at both. The same way that you should hold the pen. This is a pen. You should hold the pen as well as you do the sword.
Okay.
Right? There are two types of combat and you should be proficient at both. One combat is laws, and laws are used to contain men.
The domestic.
Exactly. The other combat is that of the sword.
Foreign
force,
policy.
And it's used to contain beasts.
Okay.
Now, man can be contained through laws because he has reason. But sometimes, as a result of his passion, man forgoes his reason and enters an animalistic, barbarous state. And for that cause, having deferred his reason, you are no longer obliged to treat him with laws, and the only recourse is through force, which is why the pen must be as strong as the sword. Politics is ultimately coercive.
Be as ferocious as a lion
And
be rusé.
rusé?
Rusé.
Hidden?
Rusé.
Rusé. He's seeing a French word I don't know.
Rusé as a fox.
Sneaky, sly.
Sly.
Say it again. Say this expression.
Rusé.
No, this whole be as ferocious as a
That's
lion.
from Machiavelli, by the way, and Napoleon
The lions and
Bonaparte
foxes,
used to
yes.
recode it.
Yes.
Be as ferocious as a
Lion.
lion.
And
No. It's know when to be as ferocious as a lion,
lion.
and as sly and
as a
sneaky
fox.
sly as a fox. That's it.
Yes.
You see, it depends, right? Like you can be confrontational in your political life, and we're all politicians because from the fact that we're social creatures, we're politicians.
In your own life, you are a politician.
Completely.
You are the prime minister of your own life. You are the executive of your own life. You must carry out the laws, values, culture, and economization of your own life. You direct your own personal economy. You identify your own political priorities. Maybe I need to get this job. Maybe I need to do this study.
You mean that an individual who's a strong individual will breed a strong family, and a strong family will by itself breed a strong state? So everything starts with the individual?
Yes, we can
Incredible.
better our nations by bettering ourselves.
Incredible.
And that's what Machiavelli says when he says, I love my city more than my soul.
I see.
He knows when you say, I love my city more than my soul, it means I can bring glory to myself by bringing glory to my community. It means my political establishment is not just a geographical space where I can post videos of expensive dinners on Instagram and show off which clubs I go to and pursue my particular ends, but my political community is an entity of which I am a member, and I am a member of the political community. Therefore, it demands my contribution and it demands my virtue.
We could even say that back in the day, statesmen used to think in terms of...
I want to discuss this. Continue.
Generations.
Whew.
But nowadays, we could say that politicians talk about next elections.
Yes.
That would be the difference, right?
The difference between a politician and a statesman
Yes.
is that the politician thinks for the next election,
Yes.
and the statesman thinks for the next
Generation.
Where are we right now? We're in a I'm not going to reveal too many secrets.
Please don't.
But we're in a house that was purchased by the 14th Prime Minister of Canada, Lester B. Pearson. And I love this man so deeply because he is a paragon of what Canada could be. And I say that the society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade...
So you mean
they
he
will
never
sit.
lived here?
He never lived here.
So he planted that tree so you could sit in its shade?
I'm sitting in the shade
And
of a
so
tree.
we could shoot that video?
So we could shoot this
I
video.
can't believe it.
We are sitting in the shade of a tree planted by Canada's 14th Prime Minister, Lester B. Pearson. A shade that he never enjoyed for himself, because at the time that he planted the seed, he was too busy saving the world from nuclear Armageddon during the Suez Crisis. He was the Foreign Affairs Minister of Canada at the time. But that's a statesman. That's the difference between a politician and a statesman.
I see. So what's the issue nowadays with society? Everybody wants everything quickly, without thinking of the next generation, without taking time to long-term investments. You could see that politicians, the way politicians, the elite act, will downgrade to the common people.
Exactly.
If we could call them the common people.
But there's nothing common about them. Each
Nothing.
one of them are extraordinary. It is in the ordinary people that we find the most extraordinary qualities, I find.
Take notes.
I'll write that down.
Take notes.
It is in the most...
Wow.
But it's true. Because if our state is great, if the political community is great, it's because the citizens are great.
Don't make me like you.
Well,
So, Tab, you've read The Prince.
front to back twice.
I've read The Prince.
Okay.
I would say that The Prince brought into my life. Well, first of all, that book wasn't meant for the common people.
It was meant for...
It was meant for the elite.
Exactly.
Now, with all humility, I would consider myself as being a simple common man.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not for you.
Oh.
I know I'm the small huckleberry of your heart. Right? But I would say that Machiavelli made me understood that I am my own prince in my own kingdom. And for now, the kingdom of heaven is within me.
For the time being.
For the time being. But it is, and it's everybody. Everybody's like that, right?
Yes.
You
Each
should
of
be
us.
good in your head in order to create value and material
Yes.
riches. You see? And it all begins that way.
Yes.
So I would say that it is really important for anyone to read Machiavelli, not only political science students.
No, of course not.
Because Machiavelli, despite his bad reputation, right? He has a bad reputation.
We'll discuss that later, but continue.
In most common circles, I would say, when
Yes.
somebody tells you in French, for example, they would say, c'est machiavélique. Like people would understand it as being bad, right?
But you know what it is?
Yes.
Machiavelli is difficult to read. Even though it's a short book, he deceives you by writing this short book, but it is so full of information. The length of the book is short, but the length of the wisdom is endless, right?
Especially the references, huh?
Yeah.
Like if you don't know the political context of the time, if you don't know who's Cesare Borgia, who the Pope Julius is, you wouldn't grasp it.
So Machiavelli is difficult to read. And so by saying simply that Machiavelli is evil and satanic and he's bad, whereas I am just and righteous as good, it's an easy way to just say, I'm not going to read it.
Completely.
It's an easy way to defer yourself from the responsibility of personal edification. And it's an easy way to evade confronting these essential facts as Machiavelli would have liked us to do.
I see.
To confront the essential facts.
I need to pee.
In fact, I need to pee too.
Yeah, perfect.
You'll take this bathroom, I'll take the top one. Yeah. We'll be right back after a break after...
Piano.
We're fired up.
Beautiful.
Fortune, luck, is a swelling river which must be contained by the careful and pragmatic construction of dikes. Right? You know what I mean?
Completely.
If luck is the swelling of the river, then
Yes.
then virtue, if fortuna is the river, virtue is knowing that you must construct dikes and dams beforehand.
I would say that there's a certain dichotomy in Machiavelli's view, right? The ruler must tame fortuna by being
Virtuous.
virtuous,
Yes.
right?
Bro, how
Chase
drunk are
fortu-
we right now? How drunk are we right now?
We need to cut that.
We must cut this. We must meditate. God, restore to me the strength which I have abandoned through my indulgence.
That's right.
If there is one piece of wisdom which we may derive from Machiavelli, what might it be?
Honestly, I would say that you should look at things the way they are, not the way you want them to be, or not the way the law makes them look like they are, right? Like, for example, you should understand that, especially in a republic, big families,
Or in a democratic society in general.
right, you have factions, you have groups who are
People attempting to make coalitions so as to gain majoritarian votes.
completely. It's not. It's more of the realistic rule of balance of powers than the rule of law that predeterminates the outcome of political institutions.
Yes.
So I would say that the most important thing we could understand from the Machiavellian philosophy is that have the courage to look at things the way they are.
He discusses as be bold. Fortune favors the bold. You may not know what destiny has in hand for you. You may not know what Lady Luck or the goddess of fortune has destined for you. All you know is that you can rely on your own efforts.
And nowadays, people need to be up to the task by honestly looking at things as the way they are, by certain points that would be re-evaluated by Machiavelli, which is completely and honestly wisdom that has been born out of sheer experience.
Machiavelli, like you said, is not writing for the average man. He is writing for the man which seeks to create order from chaos. And sometimes order can only arise through political violence. Order can only arise through willpower. Romulus kills his brother Remus to found Rome. And we may say, oh, it's not right to kill your brother. Well, though Romulus's actions may accuse him, his results excuse him. He slaughtered...
You would completely justify Cain's actions towards
Yes.
Abel.
Perhaps.
I see. So you mean achieving a smaller bad to a greater good. A toast. A toast to the girl I love the most. Please. Some ships are wood ships.
But those ships, they sink.
Our ships...
Our friendships,
and to those ships...
we drink.
Cheers.
Oh.
Cheers, boys. Boys.
Cheers,
Boys. I would say that in conclusion, that Machiavelli's lecture are still relevant to nowadays future leaders, not just in the political spectrum of an aspect of things, but even business,
Yes.
future business owners.
We've seen how there are books that pertain to business which have to do with the fact that with Machiavelli on business. I've seen such books titled as Machiavelli on business. And what that indicates is that Machiavelli, though he is writing in Renaissance Italy, he is not writing about Renaissance Italy. He's writing about all men in all times. All of those people who seek to conduct and create political order from moments of chaos and uncertainty.
So we could say that those are rules enacted for humans' passions, and humans' passions are interchangeable. They are always constant throughout the passing of time.
And that's what makes history cyclical. The fact that human passions are constant has made history cyclical.
So that's why our viewers should read Machiavelli.
Exactly. We have a link in our bio, in our description, where we recommend to you one of our favorite editions of Machiavelli's The Prince, as well as the Discourses. It's a great read, and I highly recommend that you read it, if you wish to be a prince in your own lives, that is.
Voilà.
Yes. Voila!
Voilà, 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 voilà qui je suis. Mais voilà, même ici, mes années c'est fini. C'est mes voeux, c'est mon cri. Mais voilà, tant pis.